Hey there, my name is Raimundo Flores Jr., and today I'm presenting my case study for the Google Data Analytics Capstone project. Starting off with the title page, Electricians in Texas, presented by myself, Raimundo Flores Jr. It's currently October of 2022. The next slide is the table of contents. So there's 6 sections in total: introduction, objectives and sources, data cleaning, data manipulation, analysis, and then finally the key takeaways and the results. So the introduction, who am I? I am a graduate of UTSA, aspiring data analyst, and here are the 4 links that you can get a hold of me and kind of see the work that I've been working on. I'm currently a project coordinator for an electrical contractor here in the Houston, Texas area. I've been working for the past 4 or 5 years in the electrical industry. I actually do have the apprentice license. I'm going on 4 years now. I decided to create this case study based on that kind of background. So one thing that came to mind was the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulating. So they are kind of an open records faction. So objectives and sources, what's the big idea? Where is the data from? So kind of leading into that, the business task that I'm trying to accomplish with this case study is basically to obtain an understanding of licensed electricians in Texas for potential investors, master electricians looking to open up a business as an electrical contractor, and mainly just for those interested in breaking into the career of an electrician. Kind of gives you some insight on that. The other 2 main tasks that I'd like to tackle is exploring the turnover rate of licensed electricians throughout the years. I want to see like how many has been issuing licenses versus how many have been just kind of like forgetting about the license or just not pursuing the trade any longer. Then the third item is going to be determine the locations of where all of the active electricians are. Like, are they all associated with certain cities, or are they kind of spread out? That's kind of what I'm trying to tackle. So the raw data sources, the primary data set was obtained from the Texas Department of Licensing and Regulating. So they are open records. You can go on their main website and search for the CSV files directly. But the thing is that only shows the past like year or 2. And so I wanted to do kind of an analysis of over the last couple of years. So in my request, I simply requested if I can get 3 to 4 years or so. And much to my surprise, they sent me over a data set that included over 232,700 rows before the cleaning, and ranged from the 2004 to 2022 being the present. And that's looking at the issued licenses, because they had a column for issued licenses and then a column for expired licenses. So it's got some data all the way back to 2004. I did want to do some sort of plotting on the maps in Power BI or Tableau. So I did want to get some geographical location to tie it in with the existing information in the data set, which was the county information and also the county codes. But the county codes that was in the raw data set was strictly mailing codes. So there's a difference between the regular county codes and the county mailing codes. So I had to kind of figure out a way to do that and get the data joined together. So one of them was from Texas Workforce Solutions, and then data.texas.gov and United States zipcodes.org. A brief overview on all of the license levels. So the first one you got is the apprentice, residential wireman, journeyman, master, and then the electrical contractor. So going back to the first level, which is the easiest to obtain, really you just have to go to their website, fill out an application and pay, I think it's about $20, and then they issue you your first apprentice license. So it's the easiest to obtain. There's no experience required. Must work supervised by a journeyman, because obviously apprentices, first year, you're not going to know anything, and there's certain dangers with this line of work when it comes to getting shocked and just hazards in general. So definitely want to work supervised by under a journeyman or a master electrician. You must be employed by a master electrician. There are certain processes that TDLR takes to do verification of hours. So verification of employment and verification of OTJ hours, which is where it leads us to residential wireman. So it does require a state test to obtain after you get the 2 years of experience or the 2000 of OTJ hours. And what OTJ hours is, it just means on the job training. So that's where it comes into play with the verification of hours under a master electrician. Once you get to residential wireman after those 2 years, you can start working independently, but only in residential settings. Next one, which is pretty much the bread and butter for most electricians out there, the journeyman. So usually you just need 4 years to test for it, or 4,000 on the job hours. These guys they're pretty much the backbone of all the service industries. So they're the technicians that are driving the vans by themselves, service vehicles. I currently manage and coordinate a lot of the projects that are specifically just journeymen and a couple master electricians. So this requires a state test, just like any of the other ones. They can work independently, and they can also train new technicians. So, like I said, the apprentice has to be supervised either under a journeyman or a master. So the journeyman has that ability to just start training the new technicians as they come in. And then go to the next level, which is the master electrician. Normally, these guys are the ones that are planning on obtaining their own business, or at least at one point in their career, they want to work independently and kind of operate their own business. So the guys that don't, then they just kind of stick with journeyman. So they're pretty much just fine with that. The pay is pretty much a little similar, but master electricians, if you start using your own business, you can gain quite a bit more income. And then the electrical contractor is a license that you have to obtain in order to operate as a business. So they kind of go hand in hand with each other, the electrical contractor and the master electrician's license. So that gives you a brief overview of all the different license levels that are going to be the focus of this case study. Next, we got the data cleaning section. So these are going to be the tools and techniques used to clean all of the data. First one is going to be Microsoft Excel, then MySQL Workbench, R, and the details in my cleaning report in the GitHub repository. So in Microsoft Excel, when I initially got the raw data set, it was in a workbook format, so that .xlsx. So I converted that to a CSV file because I knew that that was kind of a little easier to import and export into a Workbench, at least from my experience. So in Excel, I also removed some unnecessary data. There's quite a bit of columns in there that just didn't seem like they would be pertinent in the analysis portion of it. So I decided to just kind of remove it entirely. Some other things in Excel was just minor stuff like using the find and replace function to clean up the headers. And then I just got them all to lowercase to kind of look more uniform. And I used the XLOOKUP with the zip codes data source to populate the county's data into the blank spots in the main data set. After it was kind of cleaned up, I went to MySQL Workbench. I created a database and the tables that had the same number of columns and the same headers as what was in Microsoft Excel. I just wanted to make it as easy as possible for the data to be imported. And that's when I used the load data local in file feature in the MySQL Workbench. After that, I removed the duplicate values by utilizing the row number window function. So this was kind of fun to learn. I think it's going to come in real handy. I knew I was going to have to do some joins at some point, and the one that I was doing was an update join. So I knew I could update stuff, but it was new for me to do the update join. So that was kind of cool to learn as well. Basically, I was doing a self join, but using an update function so I can populate some of the missing data with the corresponding values that were like in the same kind of row in that data set. Finally, for the blanks and the nulls that I couldn't populate, being those that had multiple columns in each row that were blank, and it was very minimal. It didn't really affect the numbers all too much. And then over in R and R Studio, I did do a separate kind of repository explaining that. I did an R Markdown. I used a Netlify to kind of publish that on a website just so you can see the different packages that I used and the different steps that I did to do a simple web scrape on some of the data and then join it together to create one of the data sets that was in the source section of this case study. Details are in the cleaning report in the GitHub repository. Moving on to the next data manipulation section. This is what I did with the clean data. Again, we were in MySQL Workbench. So I extracted the data and created some of the tables from the main data set. the licenses by type. There was a bunch of different other licenses that had to do with electrical work, but since we were only focusing on those 5 licenses of the apprentice, fireman, journeyman, master, and electrical contractor, I narrowed it down by creating a table for that. And then I also wanted to look at the expired versus the active licenses. Also wanted to populate the number of years of experience just to kind of, because I knew it was probably going to be a good thing to do for the analysis portion of the project. And finally, I did a query to find out the location of electricians by counties. After it was all pretty much manipulated and ready for analysis and visualization, I got Microsoft Power BI up and running and did a connection to the MySQL server and was able to get all of that data into the Power Query editor in Power BI. To house all of the visualizations that I created, I did a dashboard, was able to create that from the Power Query data model. Section 5 is the analysis and visualizations. So what kind of insights were derived from these visualizations? At the time of the case study, there was a total of 138,768 active licenses and then 77,748 expired licenses. And these were from all electrical workers in Texas. So I wasn't just looking at the specific ones for those 5 for this case study. The next one was when I finally narrowed it down, the total was 132,625. So 138 and then 132. So it's very minimal difference. So that's just telling us that 95.6% of all electrical workers and licenses taken, issued from TDLR are those 5 electrician licenses that, we're dealing with. Delving deeper into the expired versus issued licenses, I created this chart to view it by year. So going all the way from 2013 to 2022. As you can see, going up to the 2019 from the 2018, there was a little bit of a jump on the issued, only about 2,000 of them. But then when you go from 2019 to 2020, it's almost double of the issued licenses. So it jumps from 13,284 to 24,722. Whereas the expired ones kind of stayed relatively the same kind of fluctuation as the years prior. So 607 to 536. And then looking at that difference from 2019 to 2020, from the expired and the issued, that right there just kind of made me come up with the theory that it was likely due to the pandemic hitting the US in 2019. So it was causing a lot of businesses to close down, leaving the public to search for alternative means of work in the electrical field since it was considered an essential. So during that time, I myself was working in the industry, and we were working the whole time. So every time that everyone was closing down and everything, we were still going at it, going strong, doing our installations, our repairs, and all that. So some of the data that I found from a CDC's timeline website said that around March of 2019 is when the US government entities were in the process of shutting down businesses considered non-essential, leaving an unemployment rate of 14.7%, which was the highest since the Great Depression. So that's crazy. So it was 14.7%. And so people started looking for different ways to make money, and so I think that's what caused that spike in the issued licenses. But then from 2020 to 2021, if you're looking at the red, the expired licenses, it's greater than the number of issued before. So just from that 1 year, you see people getting their apprentice license and then just forgetting about it, or just realizing that the job is a lot harder than what they anticipated, or whether they couldn't find a job. They just kind of let go. And then you see that the following year in 2021, there was some more issued. So there was a more influx of people trying to think of the same thing, trying to get more. Looking deeper into the expired versus the issued licenses, I created the charts for each type. So as you see in the apprentice licenses, the numbers are pretty high. So it's 22,000 to 29,000 and all the way to 39,000. So the 39,000 is going to be that this past year from 2021 to 2022 for the apprentice licenses is when the number of expired licenses. So it's people starting to realize the job's pretty hard, or they just don't think it's for them. But one thing that I was kind of curious about, surprised about really, is the more experienced license types. So like I said, the journeymen, they make a good amount of money. So when I saw that jump in 2021 to 2022, I'm wondering if it was possibly because of the pandemic. Maybe it was an adverse effect as well. Maybe the companies that they were working for was cutting back on hours and just kind of caused them to give up on being a license. So it's all speculation right now, but it'd be fun to kind of get a little bit more data, maybe some surveys or something that I can get out to these guys. Overview of the active licenses. Apprentice electrician section is more than half. So the barrier for entry is really low. Like I said, it's just $20 and you sign up for TDLR and they issue you the license. And then journeyman electrician being the second biggest. But my main kind of focus went to residential wiremen. You see how small it's only like 1.2% of the entire active licenses in Texas right now are the residential wiremen. The residential wireman is not really something that's very sought after, obviously, as you can tell here. But from my experience, when I speak with these journeyman electricians and some master electricians, I kind of ask them about this whole residential wireman license. And a lot of them have told me that they just don't bother in getting it because they know they're going to get the journeyman license eventually, and that the pay jump is not that like different. So from an experienced apprentice electrician to a residential wireman, the pay jump is not that much, at least from my neck of the woods, I guess. So the active electricians by county, so we're looking at the location aspect of the active electricians now. The bottom here, you can see the state of Texas, the heat map. I've got it in shades of blue. You can see that on these counties, the largest populated cities, like Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, and Austin, you can see that on those county sections, they're a lot darker than the other ones. With Harris County being the largest, you see on the top left, on the top right pivot chart or pivot table, Harris County, which is the main kind of county, I guess, in Houston, has a total of 15,837 apprentice electricians alone. So that is quite a big number. And then you look at your journeyman licenses, and there's only 5,301. So that kind of ratio, the 3-to-1 ratio, for every journeyman license, they've got three under their wing, training them and everything. The majority of the active electricians kind of focus around the larger populated cities. The experienced electricians, when I think of experienced, my company, they have a policy where they do not hire any electricians with less than 10 years experience. So with my kind of perception of an experienced electrician, I think of anyone that has over 10 years. So if there's a lot of journeymen that I know personally who have over 10 years experience who are not even bothered to go for the master electrician, whether it's because they are content with their current current position, or they're just kind of don't want to have the hassle of having to test, because testing for that master electrician license, from what I've heard, is very difficult and book heavy. So the visual below shows pretty similar to the blue one before, but there are some counties that just don't have any 10-year experienced electricians. I also added some of the cards there, I guess the KPI cards. There's 11,000 10-year apprentices. That just kind of baffles me. So apprentices, I mean, after 2 years, you can test for reservoir wireman. After 4 years, you can test for journeyman. And 11,000 of them are just sticking with their apprentice licenses. So that, to me, from my experience, I've talked to some apprentices where they about like 6-year apprentice or 7-year apprentice or something like that, and they're just pretty much content with the pay that they're getting. I don't know if it's the area that we're in or what it is, but That's just kind of astounding to me how there's just so many apprentices with that level of experience that have not even tried to progress to residential wireman. I mean, you see, look at residential wireman here, it's only 771 out of the entire state of Texas for 10-year residential wiremen, 771. Journeyman, that's to be expected, 19,000. So that's kind of where everybody stays at. And then your 8,731 is where the people that want to try and get their own electrical contractors licenses or start their own business is where they move up to the masters. And then electrical contractors, there's plenty more than that, but with 10 years of experience, businesses that have been here longer than 10 years, 4,328. Harris County is still dominating on the volume of experienced electricians. You can see that there are counties that have less than 300 masters, indicating that it's a possible area to open up an electrical business with very little competition. So the key takeaways from this analysis that I was able to get was job security. That's one of the big ones. So even before the pandemic, the number of technicians kind of rose steadily from year to year on the issued. The expired licenses line on the line chart kind of fluctuated a little bit, but the number of issued licenses was always higher. So job security, I think it's one of those because it is an essential career, something that's not going to go away. So job security, it's always going to be there. It's in the data, you know. So and then the next one was in the larger cities, the more techs. So that larger populated series have the higher number of technicians with the 3-to-1 ratio of trained versus new techs. This is what we saw in that other pivot table. So, and then the third one, key takeaway was COVID the culprit for this sudden influx of licenses? I think so, and it'd be curious to kind of find out what type of data I'd be able to find to kind of corrugate. I forget what that word is, but to find out if that's true or not. I've got three main recommendations. The first one being, if you're trying to establish a contracting business and want to ensure that you don't really need to worry at all, that you don't want so much involvement in there, you can just kind of give them the projects and just say, hey, go take care of them. Then you'd want to go to a county that has a higher number of journeyman electricians that can handle the workloads alone. They can work independently, they could train younger technicians. So they are pretty much your bread and butter as far as the workforce goes. So if you want just a less of a hands-on thing, you just kind of want to own the business and basically have it operate itself with very little hands-on, you got to be prepared to pay upwards of 80,000 salaries 80,000 in annual salaries for experienced electricians. And this, I got that number from a data source that is in my analytics journal and my cleaning report, which you can find in my GitHub repository. But basically, that's just your average salary for the experienced electricians. And then you're also just gonna have to rely heavily on getting those licensees that have the journeyman license. Then my second recommendation is if you wanted a more hands-on approach, or if you're a master electrician and you still want to get out in the field and everything, and you have some journeymen that are willing to train the newer technicians, you could kind of keep the costs down on the income by getting a higher number of like apprentices to journeyman electricians, because the pay rate for the apprentices is a lot lower than the journeymen's. That's just kind of like a given based on the level of licenses. So you could save money on salaries. You could also work with the number of apprentices to journeyman ratio, like a higher number of apprentices to journeyman. Then the final third recommendation that I've got is since the electricians are considered essential workers, the likelihood of job security is positive. So it may be a good idea to open up shop at counties that had low numbers of competition, kind of what I stated earlier. So if you see in my Microsoft Power BI dashboard, if you go to that link from my GitHub repository, you can hover over each county and it gives you a breakdown on the tooltip for every single county out there, what type of electricians are there and how many of each type. So you could kind of look at that and see low numbers of competition, meaning lower in master electricians, lower in electrical contractors. Then that could be a better place to establish a long-term presence, um, to make sure that you just don't have to worry in the coming years, so that you have that job security and that you are the go-to electrician for that area. So thank you very much for sticking around for this. I did use this template from Slides Go. And if you need to get in contact with me for any reason, then my email address is right here. Thank you very much for watching. That was the case study for my Google Data Analytics certificate. I do plan on creating some more projects for my portfolio website, so feel free to follow me on LinkedIn, network if you would like to. I've got some stuff in the works. Thanks for watching.